Good morning. Today is the 26th day of Elul, the second day of creation, and the 12th of September. And we are up to the third reading of Ha'azinu. And the third reading contains two very big topics. Basically, it tells us about all the goodness that lies ahead, and tells us that about the goodness with which God took the people out of Egypt, and the goodness of the land of Israel that He's bringing them to. And He fed them cream from the herd, milk from the flock, the fat of fat lambs, rams from Bashan, he-goats and wheat, fat as kidneys, and strong wine, blood of the grape. He settled them in strongholds of the land. And then the turning point comes. After receiving all this effluence, all of this greatness, instead of appreciating God's bounty and using it properly, the formerly upright people, which is how they're called Yeshurun. Yeshurun is the feminine form of Israel. I think something that most people don't know. When a word in Hebrew, when a name in Hebrew ends with Aleph Lamed, El, that's the masculine form. When it ends in Vav Nun, like Yeshurun, that's the feminine form. So we have Yisrael, Yud Shin Reish Aleph Lamed, and then Yeshurun, Yud Shin Reish Vav Nun. We have this by the angels also. Angels that end with Aleph Lamed are considered to be masculine. Angels that end with Vav Nun are considered to be from the left side, feminine. So the formerly upright people, Yeshurun, the Jewish people, got fat from overindulgence and kicked rebelliously. You became fat, then thick, and finally covered with fat. The nation forsook God, who made it, and scorned the rock of its salvation. They provoked Him to jealousy by worshipping strange deities. We say it was so strange, the deities that the Jews, that the Israelites worshipped in the land of Israel, that a non-Jew could come up to one of these idols and say, well, this one certainly was made by a Jew. I don't know if you want to draw the analogy to modern art or anything like that, that you can tell that when the imagination runs too wild, it probably was done by a Jew. Maybe it's a rule, maybe it's not. And they then sacrificed to demons of no utility, a deity to whom they had not known beforehand. And you have forgotten the rock who gave birth to you. In doing so, you have prevented Him, so to speak, from bestowing good upon you. You have forgotten God who brought you forth from the womb being, of course, Egypt. So it starts off telling us about all the goodness, and then turns around and tells us what happens, that there's a rebellion. But as opposed to many other places, here it tells us the reason. The reason is 3 stages. You became fat, shamanta. You became thick, avita. And you became covered, kasita. So these 3 words are the key for a rebellion that comes out of there being too much plenty. And in many ways, this is the situation that the entire world maybe is facing today, or maybe not the entire world, but a good deal of the Western world, of becoming fat and therefore forgetting God. But what I want to look at is this notion of there being 3 stages. First growing fat, growing thick, and then growing covered, becoming covered. What is the idea here? First of all, what does it mean to be shamen, to be fat? Here it doesn't mean exactly, if I were to ask you, which of the numerals from 1 to 9 is the fattest? Which one would you say is the fattest? Well, I think that it's probably clear that 8 is the one that looks fattest. And how do you say 8 in Hebrew? You say shmone. It says the word shmone, 8, actually comes from the word shemen, from the word meaning fat or oil. And so it's not just a sense of fat. The way we understand fat today is that you become round. It's not just round. The idea is that you take up more and more space. You take up more space, and the space that you take up is like a feeling of entitlement. It feels like, I have a place in the world. So the fat is really indicating a two-dimensional type of space that I inhabit, or plane that I inhabit. The feeling there is that I am the Lord of my house. I am the Lord of this property. I have property. The second stage is one of avita. You become thick. And thick is very uncommon actually in the Torah. In fact, it's so uncommon that I believe this is the only occurrence of it. There is something close to it by Anaf Etz Avot, by the what we call the myrtle branches. Avot there means that it's intertwined, but the whole idea is that there are three components to it, like in a rope, like in a myrtle branch. The myrtle branches that we take for Sukkos, the 4 species. So out of each nest, we call it, there need to come out 3 leaves, 1 on each side. And so thickness means that you've grown another dimension. And this dimension, again, is uncommon. I'll tell you a story about this dimension. When Rabbi Isaac Luria passed away, it's reported that before he passed away, he said he would have to come back again to finish explicating his whole system of Kabbalah. The Sephardi Kabbalists identify Rab Shalom Sharabi, the Rashash as he's called, who lived about 150 years later, with the reincarnation of the Arizal. And the reason that they identify him with it is because he took all the writings of the Arizal and he said, the reason we have questions is because we're missing a dimension. We need to add one more dimension here. So it's almost like he took a two-dimensional figure that Rabbi Isaac Luria had painted, a two-dimensional model, and he added depth to it. He suddenly made it three-dimensional. And that's exactly what he did, by the way. He added a third dimension to everything that the Arizal had said, to everything Rabbi Isaac Luria had said. And using that technique, he solved many problems. But what does it mean in a person to say that I now have depth? Well, that goes beyond property. That is already what we call the depth of thought. That a person says, I'm a deep thinker. It's not by chance that we call it being deep. We call it depth, avita. You've grown deep. You've grown another dimension to you. You've become thick. Thickness means depth. Meaning that you are beginning not just to be fat like before, that you have many possessions, but now you begin to say, I also have an incredible understanding of reality. And in my understanding of reality, I don't need to be commanded by God. I'm not a creation. I am the creator. I become the creator himself. I understand the secrets of the universe. This is, by the way, what the book of Job is predicated on. That Job is under the assumption that he knows how the world works. And Elihu ben Brachel, the 4th figure in the book, who suddenly shows up and says, and was listening to everything between Job and his 3 companions, he comes and says, everything you said is right except for one thing, you don't understand how God works. I just happened to see in the New York Times this morning an article that said, even a theory of everything in physics will not teach us what we want to know about the universe. And there's a lot of reasons to say that. But what it means is, as deep as you go, in the end you don't know, and it leaves you in a state of having the Creator above you. And that's a simple idea, that the Creator is, first of all, that which is beyond my knowledge. But when you have depth, you begin to forget that. You begin to think, I am all that there is, because here I am, I know everything. These two states lead to the covering. The covering means, obviously, the covering up of the Creator, but even more than that, the covering up of myself. In Chassidus, this is called a tzaddik in pelts. It says even if a person was a perfect, righteous, and pious person, he can be covered in himself, not taking care of those around him. In other words, he feels that he's a master of his life, he's a master of the universe. He doesn't need to take care of anyone else. Everybody else should just get along. And we know that capitalism has a tendency to do that to a lot of people, but truly all the systems of the world, the moment that you hit any kind of prosperity, whether it be by your own means or whether it be because of a post that you've been given in government and so on, the tendency is to quickly forget about all those around you. You become covered. Tzaddik in pelts means a pious person in a fur. He's in his own fur. He's not interested in anything else. Now, the scary thing about this is that we could say all of this about God himself. Sounds a little sacrilege, but you'll bear with me for a moment. Because God has everything. He is Shamanta Avita Kasita. He is a tzaddik in pelts. That is the origin of creation. That understanding that I can't be whole, I should not be whole. I need to also poke a hole in myself. I need to make a hole with an H in the wholeness with a WH. The beginning of creation is that God moved himself. He made a vacuum. He made a space. We don't really mean a physical vacuum. What we mean is that he made himself need something. I need. The moment that you can say, I need, you've poked a hole in this balloon that's been growing. So it's been fatter and fatter until it becomes deep and wide and thick, until it lives by itself thinking that it is the only thing in the world, and then you have to poke a hole in it. To make that hole is exactly what Kabbalah describes and Chassidus explains is the key to rectifying ourselves. Because, thank God, every person in his or her domain has a feeling of being fat and thick and covered. And so, to start off any kind of relationship, any kind of rectification, any kind of path towards a higher level, you have to first of all poke a hole in yourself. It's said that that's what the Baal Shem Tov used to do. When scholars of Torah would come to him, he would poke a hole in their entire understanding of the entire Torah. And they were shocked. And when the hole was suddenly opened, all the air came out. And suddenly they felt like they had forgotten their entire Torah because nothing made sense to them anymore. He was able to find that small location in which to poke the hole. Now this idea is exactly what happens every Rosh Hashanah. It says in the Tanya, and this is a famous thing from Rabbi Isaac Luria, that at the end of the year, meaning on the night following the 29th of Elul, the first day, the evening of the first day of Rosh Hashanah, all the energy, all the light that sustained the inner dimensions of the world recedes and goes out of the world. And it is by our blowing the shofar that the new light that has never been used before comes down. In a sense, what's happening is God is saying, in order for me to have a new year, in order to create a new year, a new world, I have to poke a hole in everything that there was, and all the air has to escape. And it's like you're faced with a limp balloon. There's an amazing symbolism in the fact that when you blow the shofar, you blow it from the thin side, the narrow end, and you blow the air into the wide end. It goes from narrow to wide. It's the same idea. That in order to bring in, usher in a new reality, you have to start with something narrow. You have to start with that hole that was created, and from that begins to emanate the new light. I want to add one small anecdote. A couple of years ago, a very good friend of mine came to me and said, I'm on a not just intermittent fast diet, I'm on a 72-hour diet. I eat only twice in the week. I eat on Shabbos and I eat on Tuesday evening. I said, how can you live like that, and why are you doing this? So he showed me that it's okay. You can do this for quite a while without anything happening. Of course, you need to drink. But to answer the question, why was he doing it? He said, because I don't feel that I feel stagnant. I feel that I've lost my energy. I've lost my powers of creation, my creativity, my ability to forge new ground. And by creating want, meaning by fasting causes, it's also good for you actually health-wise. But beyond that, the fact that you can create this desire inside, the fasting creates that desire. And when that desire burns inside, it leads to a new horizon, exactly like the shofar. It's like you go from something narrow and you span out to something new, and it's like you start a new thing. So he told me in the beginning that he was going to do this for a month. He said he stopped after 2 weeks. He said it worked so well that after 2 weeks he felt so invigorated, so full of ideas, so full of energy, so full of creativity that he didn't need it anymore, so he stopped. But that's called poking a hole. And in our generation that is so affluent, for most of us, thank God, I think that this is one of the best practices. I myself just finished a 48-hour fast, and I can tell you it was wonderful. It was just some of the most refreshing things. One of the most refreshing things I've ever done in my life. I do them at least once a week now, and they're just wonderful. So I really recommend this, especially now that Rosh Hashanah is coming, to look into this and to think both spiritually and physically. How can I poke a hole in who I am and where I am, and try to use that to usher in new energy and to start a new year. Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow, and we'll be talking about Rosh Hashanah, I hope.